Share with us today, and I'm very excited for her bravery to share such a very deeply personal story. And so if you will welcome Jerry up with me.
Well, they're handing out things. Aren't these the biggest little hairnets you've ever seen for a microphone? I didn't know they made microphone hairnets, but here we are, 2024. Okay, so while they're handing out those handouts, we'll get ready. There's my sweet family. So there are many of my friends here today, and we're not friends yet. We can be. So I just want to give you a heads up that I am a crier, and I'm going to try really hard not to cry. And I prayed a lot that God doesn't like constrict my throat. So, but that maybe I looked up how to help when you get choked up during a lesson. So if you see me stretching, breathing real deep, one of the things was to tip your head. I guess that's so tears fall right off your face onto the floor. One of them was to say silly phrases. So if I'm up here going, pink pickle, that's what's happening. Every phrase in my brain. But yeah, so I hope you have, if there are tissues up here, yes. All right. As Grace said, this is a personal story, but I'm going to do my best to share it the way the Lord wants me to share it. Rediscovering hope. We talked about hope last night, and sometimes you're in a valley of dead bones, and the Israelites were in a valley of dead bones, and God promised, because He is compassionate and gracious and love and mercy, and He's slow to anger and abounding in love. Remember in Exodus 34, it's the verse that's quoted in the Bible most by the Bible. And so we keep seeing this the Lord just keeping faithful. He's faithful to His word. Okay. So when Grace called to ask me to speak, it was just for a breakout, of course. And Grace had no idea what had happened in 2023 with our family. Not retreat. All right. It was the hardest year of my life. This is really long too. So just beware. She had no idea that the trauma that we had experienced would be something I shared. Oh gosh. She's like, hey, pickle. Hey, pickle. Hey, pickle. All right. Anyway, so she had no idea. I walked too much. All right. That this would be really, really hard. And last year, I questioned my sanity. I questioned my ability to take care of my family. I questioned my faith. All the things. I promise I'm not going to do this all the time. It's sad at the beginning. It gets better, I promise. So stay with me. Stay with me. I'm just going to have to read. Sorry. So today we're talking about rediscovering hope. In order to rediscover hope, what do you have to do first? You have to lose hope, right? Thankfully, I can stand up here before you today and tell you that hope has been restored. All right, so at the beginning of 2023, I started noticing some strange things happening with my husband. Jason, he just turned 40, and I was like, maybe this is a 40-year-old man thing. Maybe this is weird because he's turning 40. But he started he's already more quiet. He's on the quiet side. He's the yang to my yang, okay? He's a preacher, and he loves doing it. He loves sharing the word of the Lord, and he loves God. And but he started acting really emotional, and emotional is my wheelhouse, not his. But he would get really emotional before preaching, and he would tear up. And I said, "Are you okay?" And he's like, "I don't know what's wrong with me. Something weird's happening." But he continued to preach, and then these thoughts started entering his brain about God doesn't love me anymore. A lot about worthlessness, and he felt like he wasn't saved anymore. And the thoughts started consuming him to the point where he couldn't sleep. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't do anything. He would just sit and wallow in this worthlessness, God hates me. And I kept saying that's Satan in your brain. That's a lie. Fill yourself up with good things. Let's, transform our minds. I'm talking to the preacher, come on, Romans 12, we gotta transform our minds, and we're gonna think about wholesome things and pure things and happy things. And he couldn't do it. He just couldn't do it. It started keeping him up at night. I would wake up and he would be pacing in the room. And I remember one night I was like, I think we need to get you to the hospital. Something's really, really wrong. And it got so bad that he really just didn't want to live anymore. And we have 4 kids. And I'm in my 40s. I'm not marketable anymore. And so I thought, what's it going to be like? I started worrying about being a widow and taking care of kids, and what is this going to be? And look how cute he is. My baby, look at my babies are. Anyway, so he just felt like he was doomed. I had a really difficult time understanding it all. I didn't understand why he couldn't snap out of it. I wanted to shake him and say, "Stop, what are you doing? What is wrong with you?" He couldn't. And I don't know how familiar some of you are with depression. He was diagnosed major depressive disorder, and I didn't open up a whole lot about what was going on just because I was kind of embarrassed by it. It's not something we really talk about a whole lot, especially for a preacher and his family, and we're supposed to not be depressed and turn to God and do all the things I've ever told anybody else to do. But again, these thoughts kept getting louder and louder and louder. And I kept telling him he was loved and he was needed, and I shared with some of my friends about, please pray for him, I don't know what's happening. It was just so strange. I was listening to somebody the other day talk about depression, about how, you're not just sad. You're not just sad. It's like somebody's holding your head underwater and you can't get up. That's heavy. So, suicide, I always thought was something that happened because people didn't feel loved. And that's not true. That's not true. Your brain, if you're depressed, gets to a point where you just want the noise to stop. And you don't care if you die. And that's where he was. He didn't care if he died. For a long time I was like, hold on for me and the kids. And there was a point when he said, you're not enough anymore. Gosh. I ended up taking him to the hospital. Jason was in the hospital 5 weeks last year, 3 separate times. To be in the hospital for being suicidal, you have to have a plan. So his first plan was to take medication and overdose. He told me on a few occasions he actually looked up how much he would have to take to not wake up. The first time I took him, he had taken so many sleeping pills that they actually had the reverse effect, and he couldn't sleep. And so his brain was just torturing. It was just torturing him. I'm telling you what, I prayed and cast everything out of that house that I possibly could. I was like, I don't know what's going on here, Lord, but you got to stand up to all this stuff and take it away because I can't handle it by myself. Okay, so the first time it was pills, so I hid the pills. The second time, he was going to drive off of a cliff on the highway and wreck his car, so I took away the keys. And the third time, it was to jump off of our second story deck, or jump off of something because I couldn't stop him from doing it. That was the last time when he ended up in the hospital for 3 weeks. The first time he was in the hospital, they start giving you medications, and I don't know if you know much about depression medication, but once you start, it doesn't flip the switch right away. I mean, it takes weeks. And when you're in this state of just like hating living, don't want to be here, everything's awful, we don't have 3 weeks to make sure that there's medication that's helping him. And so if something didn't work, we'd switch it, then he'd have a bad day again and things would change. So the first time he went to the hospital, we came out with a little bit of hope, like, yeah, we can fix this, it's gonna be okay. The second time he went into the hospital, when I went to pick him up, the doctor was like, we can't do anything for him, he's the worst case we've seen. Like basically a death sentence, like, good luck, take him home. You know how discouraging that is? For a person who wants to get better and they say you're gonna die anyway. It was awful. It was awful. So, as you can imagine, my hope was a little shaky. It's a little shaky. All right. I'm way off my notes here, I'm sorry. All right, so again, this was really bad. It was really, really hard. We were supposed to go on our 20th anniversary cruise that summer. And we did get, some doctors that thought it would be okay for him to actually like get away. I was afraid he was gonna jump off the boat, is what I was afraid of. But he seemed to do okay. It was always like the end of the week that he would have a really hard time. When we went to church camp, it was like, I have to go home now and face all this stuff and I can't handle it. When we came home from the cruise, I don't know what I'm gonna do with my life, what am I supposed to do? It wasn't him, it was so bizarre. I would talk to him and his eyes would be black. I don't know if some of you ladies that are at church with me would ever see that, but his eyes were black. And I looked it up and I was like, that's a sign of severe depression. So if you're talking to somebody who's very depressed and their eyes are black, you're talking to a shell of a person. So we would call it shell of Jason. And when his eyes would come back, he would ask me like the same questions of stuff that we had just been talking about. It's like we didn't even have the conversation. Like he just blacked out and you could see it in his eyes. It was the craziest thing. Again, depression to me was always like, I'm really sad, I have a hard time getting out of bed, but not this. Like this was a nightmare. This was scary stuff. I would sleep, I'd be afraid all day, and then at night if he was at home, I would sleep with my hand on him. So I was afraid if he got up, he did get up a couple times and I followed him into the kitchen where our medications are. And I'd be like, what are you doing? He's like, I just needed some water. I'm like, okay, sure you did. I'd follow him back. I didn't sleep for like months. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't do anything. I was numb. I was so numb that I just was so afraid all the time about what would actually happen. We're a family that's taken some hits through the years, but I've never ever asked why me, never. Because I know, as a follower, and as somebody who grew up in church, I know that this happens. There's something called the theology of suffering, and you can see it all throughout the Bible. People suffer and suffer and suffer. But this was unthinkable to me. In Philippians, Paul says he's basically a Jew of the Jews. I was circumcised on the third day. I was taught under whatever his name was. He was a Jew of Jews. And I was like, God, we're Christians of Christians down here. Like we grew up in church. We grew up in Christian families. We went to a Christian college. I married a preacher. We adopted a little boy, Judah. We adopted Judah from China. Needed a lot of help, needed a family. we were faithful. Everything we ever did, like the moves we made, the money we invested, whatever we did had a God focus, because that's what we felt called to do. As many of you, I'm sure, feel the same. So I was like, God, you got the wrong family. What's going on here? And it was so horribly scary. Horribly scary. I just never been rocked like this. I do remember praying once. I was like, God, do you know Daniel? Do you know Daniel? He had to wait 21 days. He prayed, and when somebody finally shows up, he was like, sorry, it took me 21 days to get here. I was fighting the king of Persia. I was like, we're over 21 days. God, what fight is happening that it's taking months and months and months to get here? Where are you? Where are you? Oh, it's so hard. One afternoon, I was outside on my back deck, and I was searching, and I was crying, and I just wanted, I got very good at lamenting, guys. I don't know if you're good at lamenting. I was an expert lamenter in 2023. But I was like, God, if you are here, if you are actually here, and you see me, and you love me, show me something. I must have been outside like this for a long time. Like, God, please, give me a whisper. Give me something. Give me a whisper that you're here. Nothing. And I stood there for a long time, and I was like, are you not here? And I put down my arms, and with it, I gave up. I put my hope away. I traded hope for fear. Don't do that. Don't trade hope for fear. It's too hard. I totally missed my verse. I was reading in Matthew the other day, and this struck me. It struck me. Again, throughout the whole Bible, there's messages of people going up and down and having a hard time and getting through it. And I read this the other day, and I was like, oh, that's perfect. That's perfect for my message. He causes the sun to rise on the evil one and the good. He causes the rain to fall on the evil one and the righteous. It's up and down. There's no picking and choosing. There's no picking and choosing. We had a friend with breast cancer, and she said she didn't say why me. She would say, why not me? Why would I be so special that stuff wouldn't happen to me? Stuff happens to everybody. So I had to now looking back, I'm like, okay, that makes more sense to me now. What a hard time. So the spiral continued. I was confused and angry. Those days I was just afraid. I stopped going to church. I didn't want to praise God. I knew I would just cry the whole time. Shocker. I didn't want to see the sad eyes of fellow churchgoers at my expense. I didn't want people to see me or talk to me or hug me. I was just barely holding it together. I was just embarrassed, and I longed for God to heal us. It just wasn't happening. I still listen to my radio. My Caleb's still on all the time. I don't know if you guys have Caleb where you are. The Christian radio station. And anytime a song would come on that was like, I'm singing hallelujah because life's really hard and God, you're with me and we're all, I would turn it off. I was like, I'm not praising in this storm. I'm not doing it. He wasn't there anymore. He left me, remember? He didn't say anything. I put my arms down and he was gone. I was abandoned. So if I had to sing about being hard and then singing hallelujah at the same time, it wasn't going to happen. There was a point, again, lamenting, expert. I was like, I just talked to God so much like he was just right there. Even though sometimes I didn't think he was there at all. It was like, this is what I always did my whole life, was just talk to God like he's a friend and sitting next to me. When I was 16, I would drive along and I think Jesus was next to me and he was my buddy, and that's, like, he would get me through stuff. He was my friend, always. So I'm talking to God and I'm like, when the disciples were on the boat and the waves were high and it was a storm and Jesus was with them and they thought they were going to die, but what was Jesus doing? He was sleeping, but I didn't catch this until recently. It says in the text that Jesus was asleep on a cushion. That's the only time it mentions from being on a cushion ever in the whole Bible. A cushion. And I was like, not only were they thinking, this is horrible, we're going to die, this is awful, but Jesus was not only asleep, but he was comfortable. And I was like, God, this is anything but comfortable for me. All right. If you think, again, I was like, if you think, God, that I'm going to praise you while I'm falling in this quicksand, better grab another cushion. It's going to be a while. We're not doing it. And again, this is the opposite of what I would ever expect. Crisis was something like I never imagined living through. Okay. So fortunately, God wouldn't let me go. He didn't mind that I was lamenting and crying and not very nice sometimes. He's slow to anger. He's abounding in love. He's compassionate and gracious. So he let me continue on. I started getting up at 5 in the morning. Again, I told you last night I work at 6 a.m. I work from home. So I would roll out of bed at 5 and I would grab my Bible and I would just sit there and hold it, and I didn't know where to start and I didn't know what to say. But I was like, if you're here, God, talk to me. Like somehow teach me. And I would just pray. I depended on the Spirit a lot to pray because I just didn't know what to say. And I was definitely just groaning, and I needed the Spirit to groan on my behalf because I didn't know what to say. I would sit there for 10 minutes and go, God, please heal my husband. Please heal my husband. Please heal my family. Please heal my family. Like just over and over and over again. That's all I can say. That's all I can do. During this time, I was working full-time. My leave was dwindling. And if you don't have leave and you take off work, you don't get paid. And I was so worried about not having, being able to take care of my kids in another way, because when you're in crisis, you can't think anyway. So I was still working full-time. My kids started asking more intrusive questions. My older two knew what was happening, and they were 12 and 14. When your kids start asking you if daddy's suicidal and gonna take his life, it's just something you're never prepared to answer. But he was, and I'd say, oh guys, just pray. Pray for dad. Just pray. My oldest son is 15, he'll be 16 this month. He doesn't cry, and I didn't tell him not to cry. I'm not that mom that's like, you can't cry, you're a boy. You can cry, it's okay. This kid hasn't cried years and years and years. And I'm like, Jaden, how are you doing? How are you doing? Like, how are you handling all of this? And he goes, Mom, this is just, it's fine. Like, God's got this. We're just gonna see what happens. 15. I wish I had that kind of faith and kind of hope. But it's a hope I had to re-find. Because when you're in the pit and you seek the Lord and He helps you, there's a better relationship with God. I felt my spirit growing. Even though I was so afraid. I was watching my husband die mentally and threatened to die physically. And I was done. To be real. I was just afraid I'd lose Jason in the waiting. So again, I traded my hope for fear. And I didn't see an end. But I did see an end, and it wasn't the one I wanted. So, one day I was sitting with my friend Patricia, and I was telling her, I feel abandoned, I feel like God's not there anymore, my hope is gone. And she goes, oh, I can help you with that. And she sat in front of me, and she grabbed my hands, and she said, I have a lot of hope. and for now you can borrow mine. And I had to borrow it a lot. I had to borrow it a lot. But I can't tell you how many times I've leaned into that. Other people have hope, God. Let me borrow theirs until you show me mine again. But what a blessing that was to hear. I was driving my, hold on a second. Everybody blow your nose at the same time so I don't feel awkward. We're gonna have a clean your face moment. Sorry. It's not too sad after that. Whew, that was hard to get through. Thank you. Water break? Okay, so you know where I was. You feel it in your gut, right? You feel the hurt. You feel what I was feeling. I was driving my son to, I don't know, something ridiculous on a Saturday morning at like 6 a.m. at school. And they do this to torture us when our children can't drive yet. But on the way, I started driving away, and it was so dark that morning. It was really dark, and it was extremely foggy. Who is driven in the fog? Everyone. Who finds it difficult to drive in the fog? Everyone. Is there anything you can do to make that fog go away? No. There's nothing you can do. It's just heavy, and you can't see the light. It's very thick. So we were just driving in this fog, and it was just a typical Saturday morning. It wasn't a big deal. But I dropped him off. And as I was driving back from the school, I'm telling you, I talk to God just all the time. And I'm driving and I'm like, Lord, thank you for the hills and the trees and the sunshine. I said, thank you for the fog. And thank you when you lift the fog. And I went, when you lift the fog. This fog isn't going to stick around forever. Because God lifts the fog. And I wrote this later that day. Living in crisis is like driving in a fog. It can be dark and scary, heavy with no end in sight. You can try turning the headlights on high to help you see, but that just makes it worse. You can't move the fog no matter how hard you try. Then little by little, the fog begins to lift and you can see further down the road. Eventually, you can see clearly again. I'm thankful for a God who lifts the fog. I'm thankful he sends people outside of the fog to help me and let me know that light is still there, and it'll be there for me again too. Once the fog is lifted, the fog doesn't last, it dissipates, and then it's clear again. I taught a girls' class this summer at church camp. And it's like, our friend Ryan is the youth minister at Grand Central, and he was in this with us. But he made this whole curriculum for the summertime. Church camp was about people trusting in God from the Old Testament, like these stories, just different stories. Jonathan and his armor bearer climbing up the mountain to face the Philistines by themselves after the Philistines had taken all their armor. And God, if you give them into our hands, we'll glorify you. So, that kind of stuff. Wow, the one that really, really touched me was in 2 Kings 6, 8 through 17. And you should have that on your handout. I'm going to do yet another dramatic reading, so bear with me. Now the cup of Aram was at war with Israel. After conferring with his officials, he said, I will set up a camp in such and such a place. The man of God sent word to the king of Israel, beware of passing that place because the Arameans are going down there. So the king of Israel checked on the place indicated by the man of God. Time and time again, Elisha warned the king so that he was on his guard in such places. This enraged the king of Aram. He summoned his officers and demanded of them, tell me, which of us is on the side of the king of Israel? None of us, my lord the king, said one of his officers. But Elisha, the prophet who is in Israel, tells the king of Israel the very words you speak in your bedroom. Go and find where he is, the king ordered, so I can send men and capture him. The report came, he is in Dothan. Then he sent horses and chariots and a strong force there. They went at night and surrounded the city. When the servant of the man of God got up and went out early the next morning, an army with horses and chariots had surrounded the city. "Oh no, my lord, what shall we do?" the servant asked. "Don't be afraid," the prophet answered. "Those who are with us are more than those who are with them." And Elisha prayed, "Open his eyes, Lord, so that he may see." Then the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he looked, and he saw the hills full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. So how did Elisha's servant react to what he first saw? He was afraid, as would I be if chariots and horses and bad guys were surrounding him. Okay, so Elisha prayed for something. He asked that the Lord open his servant's eyes to see the army of God surrounding the army that meant for harm. When I look back on verse 16, I'm going to click it. All right. It says, "Don't be afraid," the prophet answered. "Those who are with us are more than those who are with them." So in my mind, I was sitting at the park, like preparing and reading this. And I thought, I want to make a picture of what this kind of looks like. So in your handouts, you have my little picture. Elisha and his servant are in the middle, that little small circle. The army of the Arameans, they're surrounding him. And then Elisha asked God to open the servant's eyes so that he would see that outer circle. When I was in crisis, I'm right where Elisha and his servant were sitting. That was me. The only thing I could see at that time was this dark, dense fog, and it was full of death. It was full of fear. It was full of anger. It was full of confusion. It was full of me thinking I was going to be a widow at 43 years old. That's what I kept seeing and what kept spinning in my mind. And again, I mentioned it to my friend Patricia. You all need a Patricia apparently. But I mentioned it to her, and so I'm borrowing her hope, and I'm telling her about this thing that I'm experiencing. I told her I couldn't see God with all the pain and the anguish that I was experiencing. So she's so wise. I'm so glad. She asked me to close my eyes and to picture people that had helped us during this horrible time. So I would picture all these different people. So I have them in my brain, and she said, "I want you to picture those people like a mosaic, and it's going to be the face of Jesus, and his arms, and his hands." And I don't know if you're familiar with mosaics, but they're beautiful. And they're little pieces, normally of broken glass, that has been put together that makes up a really big picture. So I had all these little pictures in my head of Jesus, broken people, if that's who we are, but friends and things that happened and people that helped me. And then she gave me a hug. And she said, "I want you to feel this is Jesus hugging you. And all of those people that are making him up, that's who's holding you right now." That's how I pictured Jesus for months. For months and months and months. She said something else to me. This is outside of the notes. But she asked me where like a place was that I felt comfortable, that I really liked. I love floating in a pool. It might sound really crazy, but I love floating on my back in a pool. And she's like, "I want you to think of that water. That's God, and he's just holding you there. He's holding you up." So at any time I'm like in a pool or I'm floating on my back, I'm like, "Oh, look, God's holding me." Because that will forever be a picture for me. So did I hear God audibly? Did I hear the whisper? Did I have a vision or a dream telling me, that he was still there? I did not. But I had this beautiful picture of Jesus that showed me who he was, and that's where I started to find hope again. It was through the people of God that allowed me to feel like this is going to be okay. Even despite my worst nightmares, if something did happen, it was still going to be okay. Because there was still Jesus there with all these people holding me. So when I was able to see that, I could look a little further past the fog. It started to lift more. And my outer circle was so many people, wonderful people, some of you. It became really very real to me when Elisha says, don't be afraid. Those who are with us are more than are with them. I had a lot of those people. Do I just have to go like the next arrow? No. I thought there was another one on there. No. But I saw these beautiful, beautiful people, and that's who made up my outer circle. When you're in crisis, how many of you been in like horrible, horrible crisis? I'm sure you have. I'm not the only person. And we all live life, and we're all human, and of course we're gonna go through some hard stuff. This again was like nothing I'd ever experienced before, and it just took over my body. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't think. I could not think at all. Like there were days I didn't even feed my kids because I was just like, the thought of putting food together to feed them was just way outside of what my brain could handle. It's so hard to describe how awful, how awful all of that was. But when you're in crisis, you don't think, you don't have the words, you don't have the space, the capacity to handle very much. Many times I had conflicts at work where I had meetings or I had to start or end at certain times, and my kids were at school or they had activities or they had something. And so many people, like I had to have help, I had to. And people would start, helping me take the kids or whatever. Jason actually began this treatment after his 3-week stay at the Wexner in Columbus, which is the mental hospital there. They started something on him called ECT, which is basically he gets hooked up and they would make him have a very mild seizure that would kind of reboot his brain. And this practice, it's not as invasive as it used to be. You might have heard it or even seen it in like Frankenstein or something about like shock therapy, right? That's kind of what was happening to his brain. And we had to go up to Columbus. We live 2 hours away. We had to go up 2 or 3 times a week. So it's 2 hours up. I pick him up and we bring him home. Well, again, I had to take care of my kids. I have a job. I didn't have any leave. So I'm so dependent on so many people that would drive him back and forth. And even the nurses up there, they were like, we love Jason. He's wonderful. But we've never seen support like this. Like there's always somebody out different. There's always someone different out there in the waiting room for him. She goes, wow, he must be really loved. And I was like, yep, he sure is. We all are. But again, we were desperate for help. Normally ECT, you have 6 to 12 treatments, and that should help you like knock out of your depression. We were told multiple times that Jason was the worst people had seen. We got up to 30 plus treatments. I stopped counting, and they became too damaging on him. He wasn't remembering people's names. He wasn't remembering many, many things. Like the things that we talked about, or things kids have said, he didn't remember. Even now, we'll do something, and he'll be like, we didn't do that. I'm like, we did. You just don't remember because your brain was fried during that time. He remembers some things happening now, but his memory of 2023, it's truly very sporadic. It's very sporadic. So we did end up going on our cruise. And I was like, did you remember anything about that cruise? Because we can go again. We'll just do a second round and then you'll remember it. And it'll be much better. I remember I picked him up one time from ECT and I was like, hello, I am your beautiful wife, Jerry. And he goes, thank you. Like he forgot. Hard stuff. Anyway, when you're in crisis, people ask questions a lot. They ask a lot of questions. We didn't let a ton of people know. This is really the first time I've talked about this publicly. I had Facebook and I would kind of be very vague about what was happening. Our church knew what was happening. Some very close friends knew what was happening. But anyway, it was kind of hard to ask for help when people were like, what's going on? So thankfully, God has this humongous village for me that came and, just really surrounded us. Truly, that picture of that outer circle was so full of wonderful people, and I'm so thankful for that. Anyway, okay. The first time Jason went to the hospital, hold on. The first time Jason went to the hospital, I had a friend call me, and she's like, make your life so much easier if I could take it. What would that be? And I thought for 2 seconds and said, take these dogs. Take these stupid dogs that I have. They're driving me crazy. They were 2 years old. Hold on, nose break again, everyone. Why do I have dogs? Because I have a husband, unfortunately. That's why I have dogs. But they are litter mates, and there's 2 of them, and they're impossible. And she was like, done. I'm gonna pick up your dogs. And I was like, what? I should have had a crisis earlier. She came and took my dogs for a week, and she came and she took a load of laundry, and she said, I'll bring them back later. I said, okay. And she hasn't done that again. I don't know why. But, another friend came into my house. I came home from something one day, and there was fresh fruit on my counter. There was pizza and lasagna and frozen stuff in my freezer. I really don't, I don't even know. Lori, how do you even get into my house? But anyway, it's like you snuck through the window, didn't you? Yeah, so I had friends just show up and bring food, and my boss left. I was in a call with her one day, and I'm working away, and she goes, hey, go check your front porch. And there were 2 rotisserie chickens and all this fruit and vegetables, and she had sent it to me so somebody could have food in my house, because I was not in this great frame of mind to do that. I had friends who I would be like, please take my kids, I don't know what's happening, and they would, just no questions asked. Would spend the night at their house, or take them places, or loved on my kids. I had friends who kept their phones on 24/7, and they were like, it is on, and it is loud, I have it turned up, and it's right next to my head. If you need me at 3 in the morning, call me at 3 in the morning. And I had to, one time. I had a huge box of cookies on my front porch one time from a friend who lives 700 miles away. She sent me a picture of the front of my house, and I was like, how on earth do you have a picture of the front of my house? And she's like, no, look at the floor. And there was this huge box of cookies that she had sent from Instacart or whatever. I was like, oh, it's crazy. These are just a few things that people did for me, that outer circle. I'm just sharing because they were really cool and helped me out a lot. A meal train, I had a friend create a meal train, so every other day people were bringing us food. One of the reasons I gained 30 pounds that year, but it's okay. I had a friend who suggested we make a wish list on Amazon. Oh, that was so cool. I've never done that before. You can make a wish list on Amazon and send it to people. And so my kids and I, we picked some things that they like to snack on, drinks they like to have. My kids were into playing Pokemon. We put Pokemon cards on this wish list. And my kids got so excited every day because a box would show up. Wish list box. And people who didn't live near me could send stuff. It was amazing, guys. It was amazing. We'd have mac and cheese showed up, just so my kids could make food for themselves, since I was not capable of helping them at that time. They got really addicted to Starbucks coffee. It's expensive. So, if you want to look at my wish list later. We had a pickleball set on there. Pickleball wasn't a big thing, we didn't really know what it was, but it was something that we could have in our driveway. We played hours of pickleball. I don't even know who sent it to us. Somebody sent this to us. A lot of people didn't sign their names. They were just like, hope this helps you today. That pickleball set, that's my second son, Jake. My second son, Jake, he and I played, that was our stress relief. It was like going to therapy. And he would talk to me, and we would talk about things, and that's when he was like, is Daddy suicidal, Mommy? And we're playing pickleball, having these deep conversations. And it was good. It was a blessing to our family. What else was really cool? I don't want to miss anything, because there were just so many wonderful things that happened that came out of this from my village. One of my favorite things that happened during the time was porch sitting. That's what I named it. I haven't gotten, anyway, porch sitting, that was my favorite. I would basically ask people, they were like, what can I do? What do you need to do? And I was like, I just really want to hang out for an hour. And so people would come. I remember one week I had like 6 people come to my house every night between like 6 and 7 and sit on the porch with me. And they might bring candy or something for my kids, but we would just sit on the porch. And I remember a friend, she was like, I don't really know what to talk about. And I was like, well, tell me about what's going on with Emmy. Like, tell me about your daughter and how she's playing softball or whatever. Just to give me somebody to like talk to, right? Just like get me out of my house for a second and give me a distraction. Give me somebody to talk to. I'm a people person anyway, so I needed my people. Even though I didn't want my people, I needed them. And that was super helpful for me too. I asked Jaden one day, I was like, what did you think? He's my oldest. What was most helpful during that time as I started preparing for this? And he said, I loved when people took us away to go bowling, to have ice cream, because our house was so sad. Our house was so sad, and my kids felt it. So when somebody would come and be like, hey, we're gonna go putt-putt, they were like, yes, let's go do something different. Let's not stay in this sad house all the time. So that was super helpful for my kids. Again, for kids, wish list, food, take them out, like that was so helpful. Okay. So, I did a Facebook poll. And I did a Facebook poll. And I asked my friends, I was like, when you are in crisis, what do you find that was most helpful? Okay. Does everybody have your handout? So, I said, when you were in crisis, what did you find most helpful? Take a minute and look over all of those things. I didn't put everything, this is not all inclusive, but a lot of the stuff that I have on the helpful side was mentioned over and over and over again. So I wasn't gonna write down like, send me gift cards 3 times, it's just what's on there. We're gonna take this look at the difference between the 2 lists. Now, some of the helpful things, they were very much action-oriented things. So, knowing people were praying for me was great. Giving me a gift card so that on nights when I didn't know what to do, the kids could have pizza, that was great. Food showing up at my house, awesome. Again, in crisis, you can't think. And so many times people will say, let me know if you need anything. I had no idea what I needed. I needed my husband better. That's what I needed. And that was on the forefront of my brain, and that's where all of my energy was going, to help him get better. We lived in fight, flight, fear for a year. And it was so hard to just think. I can't express that enough. Like the actions that people would take without asking me, huge, huge. I'm coming over and I'm bringing you dinner tonight at 5 o'clock. Awesome. Thank you for that. Gift cards again were so helpful. Somebody gave me a gas card for $300 so we could drive up and down to the hospital. That was huge, huge for me. And you don't even think about that kind of stuff, right? You're like, I didn't tell a whole lot of people. I told some that we were driving to Columbus a few times a week, and Jason was in the hospital, and I visited him, and all these doctor's appointments, and they gave me a gift card for gas. People reminding me what we're doing right. That was a big one that I saw over and over. Just to tell somebody you're doing a good job. This looks really hard, and it sucks a lot, but you're doing really well, and I'm proud of you. That kind of reassurance that you're doing okay was so extremely helpful, because I felt like every decision I made and everything I was doing was wrong. And again, you're not thinking, I'm just trying to save my husband over here. I'm just trying to survive each day. And I'd get tired and go to bed, and I would try to survive that night. Okay, am I getting, sorry on time. Anyway, okay. The section of things that were not helpful, I don't mean to step on any toes. When somebody says, how are you doing? very nice, not a problem. I have no idea how to answer you. No idea. Maybe if you say, how are the kids doing in school? Or how are you getting along at work? Whatever. People kept saying, do you need anything? Yes. What do you need? I don't know. I don't know what I need, but I need something. So the action stuff was so huge when you can't think. What else? Okay, so again, I said some of the things that were on that other list. Something that was not overly helpful to me, I'm gonna sound like a brat. Ready? Somebody preaching scriptures to me. Doesn't that sound awful?
No.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. As healing as that can be for people, absolutely. But when I was in crisis and people were like, God can't give you more than you can handle. I'm not handling this very well, right? Like that's not even a scripture.
That's right. That's right.
That's not even in there.
That's right.
Stop saying that. Or people would say, well, something good's gonna come out of this. Okay, but what? This sucks. Like this is horrible. I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that right now. That was just really hard. It was hard for me to hear scripture like that. Romans 8 over and over. I just couldn't do it. Something else that was difficult, like intrusive questions, that was really hard. I don't want to repeat myself over and over again and tell you how awful this is, and that I didn't tell people my husband was suicidal for most of 2023. I don't want to talk about it. Like it hurt me. So people ask me how he's doing. Oh, yeah, he's alive today. So that's good. It's just so difficult. And again, I've done some of those things on the don't say list. Let me tell you, if you think for a second you shouldn't say it, don't say it. I have adopted a child that has a disability, and sometimes people are like, well, you kind of knew what you're getting into. Nope, sure didn't. Sure didn't know that he'd be a hot mess all the time and that we'd spend hours and years in the hospital. Didn't know that. But instead, hey, I'm really proud of you for doing this. Like, you're doing a really good job. So much better. So as you look over that list of things are words. Your words are so important. You can't take them back. They're so important. They give life or they take life away. Right? All right, I've got to wrap this up. I'm so sorry. I'm going to share with you, though, something that I did find helpful. I don't know how many of you watched The Chosen. I am a big Chosen fan. I love The Chosen. It's a TV series about the life of Jesus. And I was watching one episode. It was Psalm 77 was brought up. The individual in the show she was just suffering mentally and emotionally and physically from having this miscarriage. And her mom wanted to take her to the priest and say, priest, give her some encouraging words. Give her some words from the scriptures that will encourage her. And he looked at her and he said, I don't think that's what she needs right now. And he pulled out a scroll and he read Psalm 77. And I have never been so connected to a psalm. Psalm 77, I like the way it reads in the NIV best. But the first half of it talks about crying out to God. Why have you abandoned me? Why are you gone? Why don't you answer me? Why aren't you near? Are you there? I mean, I could have written this. Asaph wrote it, but I could have written it. And then the second half says, but I remember. It's when you look back on the faithfulness of God from the things in the past that have happened, where you've seen him walk through with you, like remembering back on those things, that's what, again, brings hope up again. Just remembering, it reads, I will remember your miracles of long ago. I will consider all your works and meditate on all your mighty deeds. Looking back on how the Lord has been faithful was so helpful to me. I wasn't abandoned back then. I'm not going to be abandoned now. Exodus 34 says, he's compassionate. He's slow to anger. He's abounding in love. He describes who he is. He's not changing. Not changing because of this crisis. God didn't change. He's the same. He's the same he's always been. And I had to remember, he's always going to be that character of God's not moving. It's the same. And we have hope in that. We have this hope that that he will, be there. He will be faithful. I did have to come to the point where if Jason did die, I had to be okay with it. And that took a lot of therapy. But to know that God is good and gracious and compassionate, just hold it so close. Because that's who he is, and he's not going anywhere. He's our hope. We have living hope. We talked about last night with Jesus. He's our living hope. We were dead. We had dry bones, really dry bones. I didn't want anything to do with God. I was mad. I was scared. And Jason's okay. He's not the same. But he's okay. And he's alive. And, oh gosh. I prayed so hard not to cry. They pickled. But I have to tell you, my prayer a lot through this whole thing was that God would use our story to help other people. Right now, today, you are sitting as the answer to my prayer. Thank you for being a part of our story. Thank you. And thank you to so many of you that prayed and thought of us and cared on us, and that you were that huge outer circle to us. Keep being the hands and the feet of Jesus with your actions, with your words that are good. Tell people you're proud of them. You can't even tell them that it's going to be okay, because you don't know. It's going to be okay. I wanted people desperately to tell me it would be okay. And it truly is okay. God's still good. He's still on the throne, and we're going to have a hope in heaven, and it's going to be fine. But when you're in it, it's so hard. It's so hard. But I'm so thankful you're here. And I'm thankful I got the opportunity to share with you as I blubbered through the whole thing. But boy, am I thankful. So, and you're in my answered prayer. That makes me so happy. So, okay. I think we're done.